first, the major business drivers in West Africa, which represent around 85% of the economy in the region. So I think you all know the countries, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Senegal, and Cameroon. Then you have, well, I'll let you see the slide, give you a few insights on all these groups. The business leader, of course, it's because they have stable environments, large markets, and strong economies. But then we could say that you have regional markets like Benin and Togo, which have smaller markets. And then a few groups of countries that we may know a bit less, like Sahel countries, which are a bit less stable, we would say, and what I call sleeping beauties, which have unstable environments and small markets, but which still represent great potential. So that's what we will try to explain in this panel. And finally, Cape Verde, which is a particular case in the region and that we will develop. So I hope this map will help you to understand the region, but now I will start with the questions to my panelists. And to start, we will try to explain how the general environments evolve over the last few years. Of course, my first question will be about Nigeria, because this is the main economic player in the region. So, Sunny, where do we stand with Nigeria right now? Have you seen positive evolution over the last 2 years? We know that it's a complicated context, so can you tell us about it?
So Nigeria got hit by a double whammy, right? So the oil price went down, which is almost 75% of the nation's economy, and then the naira rose sharply against the dollar. So in the hospitality context, most of our business came from oil companies. So we were hit by that, as well as the slowdown of the economy. So 2016 entirely was very poor. But the second half of 2017, there has been a stability. So the naira is stable between 360 to 370 to the dollar. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing a little more increased activity by oil companies. So that has helped sort of room occupancy go up because they still form the largest bulk of our guests. But during the sort of downtime, a lot of hotel companies, including ours, sort of diversified into domestic guests, so tourists, other industries, pharmaceutical, traders. So I think the worst is behind us, but I can't say there's been a significant change or increased improvement in the economy, or even the hotel business generally.
Yes, Michael, does the situation Nigeria has consequences for neighboring countries? What could you say about Nigeria and maybe Ghana, which has business strongly related to Nigeria and other countries like Benin, for example?
I think you're right to start with the subject of Nigeria because it dominates the whole of this area, this region that we're talking about. The largest population, the biggest GDP, at some moments a GDP even bigger than South Africa, although that seems to be a slightly moving feast, and a terrible number of self-inflicted wounds, which you asked the earlier question, its development, has it got better or worse over the last 2 years? I think the best we can say at the moment is that it hasn't got worse. It's probably enjoying some degree of stability. But meanwhile, the lower oil price is inescapable. It's a fact. The diminishment of incoming business travel, because there is so little tourism, which can be another subject, and the general difficulty of this huge nation, not only the largest, but physically the largest, the biggest population, split pretty much half and half between two major religions, and that's also reflected in its politics. So there's plenty of things to talk about there which make life difficult. Having said that, for Hilton, it's the only market in Africa where we currently have 7 projects that are for real. We have only 1 hotel open. We've been in there for over 30 years in Abuja with the Hilton. We have the next one to open will be at the end of this year or the beginning of next at Lagos Airport, and then there are 5 more behind that. So despite the problems, this is a very important place to work. And to your question more directly, I'm a little surprised that I haven't seen that it has had, at any time in the last 4 years that I've been watching it, an adverse effect on a neighboring country. So if behind your question was, have the problems rolled over the border? In terms of north and south of the border, my answer would be no. And Ghana, I think my colleagues can talk about probably more knowledgeably than me. No, the individual countries remain remarkably peaceful border to border to border. That comment is not true if you go out towards the Sahara, but I think that's another question.
That's true. Well, maybe in terms of hotel development, but when we talk about regional demand, maybe it has an impact on Nigerian travelers that travel less to Benin or to Ghana, for example. But well, to summarize, you are saying that that you're actually positive right now with Nigeria.
I have to say I'm positive about Nigeria.
Have to say.
No, not because I'm forced to, but because the reality on the ground of this huge economy is that we are actually enjoying, Hilton is enjoying slow but steady success in a very big marketplace. We also have the advantage, as I've already said, that we've been in the country for a very long time as a hotelier.
In Abuja. And Abuja is a particular case in Nigeria, actually. A lot of projects are concentrated in Lagos, but Abuja has a huge role to play as well, with most of political activity concentrated there.
It is the political capital, whereas Lagos is the commercial capital of the country, yes. Yeah. That doesn't make them unique. There are other countries around the world where the capital is less significant commercially than a second city. I'll even include New York and Manhattan and Washington on that basis. One's political, one's commercial.
Well, okay, thank you. That being said, we'll fly to French-speaking countries with you, Erwan. Can you tell us about the major drivers in French-speaking leader countries, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, that you well know? What are also the main differences between those 3 countries?
So, as you mentioned earlier, West Africa has 17 countries. And over 360 million people live in this part of Africa. Out of those 18 countries, 2/3 speak French or Portuguese. My role for Carlson Rezidor is to focus on the French and Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. So West Africa is a focus for me, it's my focus. So mentioning about the key market out of the French and Portuguese-speaking, you mentioned Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is represent more than 40% of the GDP of West Africa for the French-speaking region. It's today, if we look at the main driver, it's the first exporter of cacao, the 4th exporter of goods. And if you look at the hotel business today, there is a high concentration of international hotel brands into the center of Abidjan. We have over 1,000 rooms with the Accor Group, and we have many brands that are coming into the market. Our position today is we are present with Radisson Blu Abidjan Airport that we opened early last year. And we are looking at expanding in Ivory Coast across Abidjan, which is the financial hub, across Yamoussoukro, which is the capital city, and we're also looking at San Pedro, which is a growing port outside of the capital city. We believe that those markets can welcome more than one brand. In Africa, we have currently 4 brands that we are developing. Radisson Blu, our upper upscale brand. Parking by Radisson, our upper mid-scale brand. Radisson Red, our lifestyle select brand. And finally, Corvus Collection. And early next year, we're going to be launching 2 new brands into the market, into Africa. Now, the main difference, if you look at Cameroon, Cameroon is in fact in Central Africa. It's the largest economy of Central Africa. It represents over 30% of the GDP of this region. And the economy is mainly based in manufacturing and agriculture and services. If you take the market into Cameroon, the hotel market has low competition. There is not many hotel brands. There is massive demand related to low supply. So if you take Douala, which is the main financial hub, which is the main port of Central Africa, you have 2 brands and 1 player. And if you look at Yaoundé, which is the capital city, you have one player, the Hilton Yaoundé, that has been there for 30 years. Many projects are on paper, not many are truly happening. It's a country that is very difficult to penetrate. The administration is complicated versus Ivory Coast or versus Senegal, where you truly have an access to, more easily access to funding, more easily access to identifying the land ownership. Cameroon is quite a challenge to go through all these necessary steps in order to close the deal. Our aim for Cameroon is to penetrate the market with our Radisson Blu brand by the end of the year, and knowing that we are present in all neighboring countries of Cameroon. We're present in Nigeria, we're present in Gabon, we're present in Congo, and we recently opened the Radisson Blu in Chad. With regards to Senegal, Senegal is a very stable country. In fact, it's the most stable country politically out of the 2 countries that I just mentioned. So it's driving a lot of attention and financial interest outside of its own country, regionally or internationally. There is a lot of projects that are currently happening. Today we have Accor that is quite present with Novotel and Pullman into the city center. New projects are coming up, either with an international brand such as Sheraton, Aloft, Hyatt. Either recently, Mangalis opened a new hotel with their Yas brand. Currently, with the market, we can consider ourselves the market leader with the Radisson Blu Dakar, with its urban resort, which is performing quite well. And we are looking at expanding further, mainly in Dakar, in the Almadi, in Plateau, at the airport. And this is our plan for those 3 exciting countries.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned Chad. I think it would be interesting to have a few insights on other countries that the major leaders. Michael, how do you approach these other countries, like Sahelian countries, which can be complicated sometimes? How is it going on for you there?
Many of the 17 countries, the problem to us as developers and hoteliers is that they are small in terms of population and in terms of traffic in and out, which means you have to think twice about whether, even with a willing developer, as to whether this actually can be a viable opportunity in terms of turning a profit for the owner and making decent fees for the manager. Having said that, there are more cities and in the 17 countries that have no international hotel brand or only one, which means for people like me, we have to look at it as an opportunity, not as a difficulty. The most recent one we've signed has been in Niger. For those of you who don't know, that's a landlocked country to the north of Nigeria. It's got a lot of sand, a lot of camels, and no international branded hotel. But it will, because there's a Hilton now under construction. And it has an airport and it has an airline. In fact, most of these countries have an airline, which is interesting in terms of transport considerations. Your question, how do we approach these smaller markets? Actually, we approach them the same as we approach a big market. It's an analysis, it's an opportunity, and if the two come together, you try to turn it into a reality.
Okay.
If I could just mention, because you picked it up at the beginning, Senegal, I agree, of course, the most stable, probably, of the whole group, economically and politically. And my observation is that this beautiful country with the most beautiful coastline, the only thing it doesn't seem to have is its fair share of tourism, which amazes me. I don't know why. If you talk about Nigeria, you can understand it is such a commercial city that it's least attractive to tourism, although it's very, very attractive to business. But Senegal is just physically beautiful and so quiet, and being able to walk on an empty beach, it shouldn't be like that. It actually should be busier. Why isn't there more tourism in Senegal?
Leave it like that. It's nice, right?
Correct. Forget what I said. We'll leave it like it is.
No, but it's really interesting because it drives me to my next question about Cape Verde. Erwan, you know well Cape Verde, which is about the only country which is really, really tourism and leisure oriented. What can you tell us about Cape Verde?
Cape Verde has been seeing a dramatic tourist growth for the last 15 years. It's quite of course, a beautiful country. It's made of 10 volcanic islands. Out of the 10 volcanic islands, you have 4 islands that have an international airport. Sal, which is the first one historically having an international airport. Santiago, where you have the capital city. Boa Vista, and São Vicente. Out of those 4 islands, you have 2 islands that capture 90% of the tourism, Sal and Boa Vista. Knowing that Sal is the number 1 island. So far, the growth has been, since 2000, almost 300% growth of tourists. It reached last year almost 650,000 tourists. And the reasons are very simple. One, of course, it's made of beautiful beaches. There is very low seasonality. The weather temperature is around 26 degrees all year long, but mostly it's extremely stable politically. There is no natural resources. Nobody is fighting on natural resources. There is not. And it has very good ties with Europe, US, Portugal. So there is a lot of support from outside strong economic countries. The feeding market for Cape Verde are European, number 1, UK, Germany, Belgium, and France. And as you know, Egypt and Tunisia had a lot of terrorism issues that has been impacting their tourism. And thus, all the tourists that were going into those countries have been going lately to Cape Verde. So in fact, he's been capturing the market of those countries. So Carlson Rezidor has been quite attentive to this market lately. In fact, I spent quite a long time going into this market to understand it in more detail, and we penetrated Cape Verde last year. So we have the Radisson Blu Beach Resort Sal that is under construction, that is going to be opening mid-2018. And it's quite a unique resort because it's on the beach. It's on the best beach of Cape Verde called Santa Maria, which is by CNN ranked top 10 beaches in Africa. It's quite a beauty. And we created a very unique resort, which is made of a massive pool with lounges and pool mixed, all in front of the beach. And we have 240 rooms and the largest conference center of Cape Verde. So I believe that, to answer your question, the reason why Cape Verde is so successful is for the stability, the beauty of the country, but also they have 40 direct flights from Europe. So the flights is a key driver. And you have a beauty, we are talking about Senegal with beautiful places to go, such as Cap Skirring. The flights are always going to be the drivers of attracting customers and thus investors. And today you have Boa Vista, Sal in Cape Verde that are being so successful because it's accessible. And since it's accessible, you can drive business.
Okay. So now that we know more about general environments in every country, I'd like to talk more about the type of opportunities that we have in the region. Sunny, you know very well Nigeria. This is one of the only countries in the region that has a multiple cities hotel development. What can you tell us about that? What do we need for multiple city development, and especially you will tell us about which hotel segment. Can we imagine that kind of development in other countries in the region?
Yeah, so Nigeria is, Lagos is, I would imagine, almost 60-70% of the market for hotels in Nigeria. And most of the development in Nigeria has been either at the luxury end, where Hilton and the other intercontinental plays, and then you'll have huge hundreds of unbranded 50, 60 key hotels. So I think the real opportunity is to create a sort of mid-market, homegrown brand that can have the faith and consumer trust of local Nigerians who are now beginning to travel and stay in hotels, no longer staying with their relatives in cities. But beyond Lagos, I think Abuja obviously is a strong market because of the presence of the government. And, you know, if you want to do business in Nigeria, you have to interact very frequently with the government. So you need to travel a lot to Abuja. Then in the south region, where we're very strong, Port Harcourt is very oil sector dominated. So I think there are 4 or 5 cities there, Warri, Owerri, Port Harcourt, and Calabar, which will see a lot of growth driven by oil expatriates and workers who are coming in and out. But I think the real opportunity is to do like a 3-4 star branded chain across, which has, as I said, reasonable pricing. Just to tell you, in terms of most hotels in Lagos, which are branded, will be $150 to $250, $300. And the unbranded hotels will be below $50 a night. So that segment between 50 to 150 per night is a significant opportunity, which Protea had, I think, a good lock in the market, but since the takeover by Marriott, they've been sort of de-Proteizing certain properties. So that's an opportunity for either an operator or one of the international brands to step in.
I agree, absolutely. And it also explains why, out of all of the hotels we have in our pipeline and under development, more than 50% of them are Hilton Garden Inn, because that's exactly the segment that should be filled at a sensible price for all types of consumers. I was interested in your comment just now about the average price in Lagos at the moment, and you're right, it's somewhere between $200 and $300 a night, depending on which hotel, but taking any of the real hotels rather than the small domestic ones. But that figure is down between 30 and 40% over the peak of, 3 years ago, when the amount of money you had to pay for the privilege of sleeping in a bed was just lunatic. But that was demand in the days of very high oil prices. Anyway, I agree. The mid-market is where the big future lies for all of these countries.
And if you look at it, only mid-market brands will be able to penetrate secondary markets.
Yes.
Yes.
And secondary.
So at the end of the day, if you make the numbers, it goes down to the volume will be with mid-market hotels. You will be able to have one upper upscale. In Abidjan, for example, you can have 2, 3, 4 mid-market if you look at the different areas. In Abidjan, you have Marcory, you have Cocody, you have Plateau. You already have 3 mid-market that you could place, whereas you will have only one upper upscale.
Where cities are made of very different and independent districts. Well, another type of opportunity could be resorts, because we talk a lot about business hotels in main economic capitals. Michael, is the market ready for leisure tourism, for resorts outside the economic capitals? And if not, what are the main challenges?
Outside the economic capitals, probably not. I mean, Cape Verde has proved a huge success.
Case, yeah.
Sorry?
Cape Verde is a Portugal.
You've said it's proved a huge success, building on strictly a tourism platform. Most of these other countries have relatively little tourism contributing to hotel occupancy and therefore to rate. It could be increased. It's a little bit chicken and egg story. You know, do we need to build the resort first and then push the guests to make use of it? Because at the moment, for the most part, they don't exist. And the big branded hotel groups are all commercially orientated. I would be hesitant to be too positive about.
Hesitant, but you would look at the opportunity.
I will look at every opportunity. You never turn down. Hell, I'm a developer. But I would be very hesitant and look twice at resort opportunities, even if literally they're presented to me, because for the reasons that I've given.
Okay. And well, to end with the very positive side, what are the challenges in the region from your point of view, Erwan, as a hotel developer? What type of challenges you face in the region, Erwan and you, Michael?
A very long answer, huh, Charlotte?
It can be very short. Funding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Funding is number one by far, and it all comes down to funding.
Yep.
Because
how can we face that?
Understanding the market, you need the right players. To have the right players, you need to pay them, and you need funding. So your challenges become non-challenging if you have the right funding. If you're delayed, you have the right funding. So it will all come down to this. Like when we say, what is the most important element when you develop a hotel location? It all comes down to funding as well, because if you have the funding, you can pay for the right location. So at the end of the day, having the right professional team, an experienced professional team that have an understanding of international standards, but as well local expertise, having an owner that is locally connected, have understanding of the local ties, regulation, administration. You need to pay those people. You need to pay different actors in order to go through those steps and be successful and not delay too much. We've seen delays going quite far and making a project completely unviable. So I'll repeat myself, but I believe it's purely funding.
You agree with that?
I totally agree, and it's exacerbated by the fact that either, and in Hilton's case, this has been true in a couple of cases, we're dealing with very wealthy, high net worth individuals. That's one approach, but that's not a recipe for mass development across an entire market or a whole country. I'm personally disappointed with the lack of help from the development banks. I don't think hotels is very high on their list of where they're willing to place their money, which is a pity. Afra Exim Bank is an example. I'm not against them. I'm all in favor of them, but getting money out of them is a far from easy task for what I can sometimes prove is a commercially viable proposition. And domestic banks, by and large, are out of their depth when you start talking about the kind of money we need for 200 or even 300-room hotels, in fact, even 150 key hotels for that matter, and the acquisition of land. By the way, I would add to your list of, you said, what are the problems? You named two. I'll add a third. And in some of these markets, it's proof of ownership of land. And I really mean proof, because everybody and anyone lays claim to the next nice piece of beachfront until 3 more people come along and challenge it, and then it just goes on and on and on. And I've seen so many sites where people have given me a stack of papers proving that they own it. and then somebody else comes along just to prove that they don't. And that's a serious problem, title ownership.
Sunny,
I would add, from an operator perspective, we have the challenge of human capital. So in Nigerian context, there is no service orientation generally among the people. So training staff, whether it's at the management level or even at the service level, is a challenge. And there are no catering colleges, hotel management institutes that allow you to, get a steady output of qualified or skilled people. So you end up training them, and we spend a lot of money training a lot of people, and then they walk across to a Best Western for 10,000 naira extra, or to a Protea. So that's one of the biggest challenges, the training and therefore retention and constant upgradation of their skills.
Yeah, and because you have mainly independent hotels, what can you tell about finding the right management for you?
I mean, of late, we've been taking lateral hires from Sheraton, and every time there's a merger, you get some candidates in the market. But I don't think there is sort of we don't have a long-term plan to fix the problem. We're trying to grow people who've joined 6 or 7 years ago and put them through the ranks. But the risk always is that for a small amount of extra money, they're willing to jump ship. They don't see the long-term picture that one day he may become general manager or director of business development. So that's, for me, human capital is a big challenge.
Well, thank you. My last question would be to the three of you. I think it's a really, really important question in West Africa. What are the key success factors to adapt the product to local markets? We have so many different markets, 17 countries, which are all very different in terms of everything, economy, demand, culture, everything. What are the key success factors to adapt the product?
They're quite multiple, but you can start with the vision and the owner. If the owner is, most of the time, at Carlson Rezidor, 85% of our owners are first-time owners, high net worth individual, meaning that somebody that is going to develop a hotel in Niamey, in Niger, to mention your project, is from Niger. It's rarely from somewhere else. It can happen. But having the local vision will drive the project towards adapting an international hotel standard into international service with local experience and local design. And normally it will be connected with having a professional team that has a local understanding with an international drive, if I may say, or an international standard. And this will be the base of adapting to the local environment.
So from a guest experience perspective, at least in Nigeria, what seems to work is, I've seen this in London, I've seen this in Dubai, I've seen this in New York. So you try and replicate those experiences, Italian marble, your bathroom fittings are imported. So the Nigerian guest feels he's in a different zone. The fact that Nigerian or African guests appreciating African themes is still not caught on. So we're still selling the sort of Western experience and dream for Nigerian money.
I agree with my fellow panelists. My first answer would have been human resource as well. Hilton has a particular advantage in Nigeria that with a 700-key, 30-year-old hotel in Abuja, we've got a natural training ground. And I'm proud of the fact that we're actually working now primarily with Nigerians at all levels. And interestingly, the next hotel, the second hotel to open, which the Curio at Lagos Airport, has a Nigerian general manager. But as it happens, he was deputy general manager at the Hilton in Addis Ababa, where he was for 11 years. So he got very Hiltonized, Hilton trained, but we were in the lucky position of being able to send a Nigerian back home with his family to run the new hotel. We do have to commit more resource to training than perhaps you would have to do in a West European country. That's just an inescapable fact. And it's not a criticism. It is just the question of the level of development and how many years people have been doing this. And the answer is not long enough yet. In terms of the physical building, if that was where your question was directed, very little. change, at least for Hilton, very little change. And of course, at the level of fire life safety, which is fundamental to the structure and the engineering, the answer is no change at all. And that can be a difficulty because the standards I think we all put into our hotels is set at a level considerably higher than local fire life safety standards. And that's just a teaching, learning exercise.
Come back just on the human resources side, our aim is obviously to have the maximum of local team. Normally we start with having a few expats that will share their knowledge and set the ground and take the hotel rolling, stabilize the operation and the performance, and then minimize the expat. Today in this hotel we have less than 1% of the staff that is expat. They're all locals. And 90% of the employees in this hotel never worked in a hotel before. And they've all been trained from the ground. And we're quite proud of them because the service is quite good for somebody that have never worked in a hotel before.
Okay. It also means you have, to turn it to a positive, it also means they don't bring any bad habits with them. I'm serious. You're training from day one.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much.